This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Welcome. Episode 673 of the DBR Podcast, the Duke Basketball Roundup. Jason Evans here with you on a fine Sunday morning. I'm joined by my buddy Donald Wine. You know, Donald, we've had a few days off. It's kind of been a nice break.
It has been. Don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen. We love the grind, but I think the players needed a nice little reset after what was a really incredible first month of basketball. And I think we all did too, right? So it's nice to have a weekend where we kind of get to relax. We all get to do our exams, like the players are doing, and then we'll get back to basketball very, very soon.
Yeah, I was going to say the players' break included probably sticking their noses in books for a long, long time. I know that at Duke, even though there are a lot of these guys who may not be staying in school long enough to get their degree, they are still they're still hard at work on their studies. It still matters a good deal to them. Just so folks understand, we're going to be talking a lot of football here at the start of this episode. We're going to have a little bit of basketball, though, for the back half, including an interesting question we got from a listener who had a very, very simple question, which is this Duke team a good shooting team or a bad shooting team? And Donald and I are going to dive into some of the numbers and some of our opinions and give you the answer to that. But before we get to any of that, it is time for us to talk a little bit about football, because in just the past couple of days, the Blue Devils found out who their quarterback of the future will be. We have talked about this a little bit on this podcast, Donald, that Darien Mensah, the 6'3" redshirt freshman from Tulane, was visiting Duke. Last time we spoke to you, he was on his visit. He basically finished his visit and immediately committed to Duke.
Yep.
Clearly liked what he got to hear from the Blue Devils regarding his role and the kind of team that Manny Diaz is putting together. I'm sure he also liked the NIL package. I haven't heard any rumors. Actually, I heard one rumor that I think was wrong. They said more than $2 million, and I don't think that Duke is quite in that area for a quarterback. That's a pretty hefty number, even for a football quarterback. But apparently, Darien Mensah very much liked what he heard from Duke regarding NIL, and he has committed to the Blue Devils. It's worth noting regarding NIL really quick, and then Donald, I'll let you get in and we can start talking about Darien Mensah, because I've got a number of really interesting things to say about him. I'm really excited about this from a Duke football standpoint. Darien Mensah, even though he was the starting quarterback for Tulane last year, technically had $0 of NIL. He was not on an NIL deal that anyone is necessarily aware of. As I mentioned, he was a redshirt freshman. He came into camp as the number 3 quarterback on the roster. They brought in a kid, I believe, from Oregon. They had another kid who was sort of coming back. And the projection was that Darien Mensah would not really factor that much into their quarterback race at all. This is a guy who only had offers from Tulane and Idaho State coming out of high school. He was like a 2, maybe 3-star recruit, not a big time recruit. And he just really impressed the coaches over the summer and was named the starter. He struggled a little bit early on, but came on really big in the second half of the season, showed a ton of growth. But in terms of NIL, they didn't allocate any dollars to him. And one of the interesting questions that Tulane had coming down the stretch was, oh, we've discovered this star out of nowhere. How do we keep this guy? How do we find the money to keep this guy? And because money is the reality in college football and college basketball at this point. There are other factors out there, but money is a huge, huge part of it. And clearly, Darien Mensah saw some nice dollar signs from the Blue Devils, and he is now coming to Duke. Give me a little bit of your impressions of this guy, Donald.
Well, I'll say first on the NIL deal, right? Like the fact that he was making no money and now is making some is going to be something that teams are going to have to deal with, right? He's not the first guy to come into camp as like the third or fourth string and end up being with the ball, right, or being in the game. So I'm not necessarily concerned about that. And on the boards and everywhere online, people have used NIL over the last couple of years as kind of a negative. This is a positive. It's a net positive. A guy who bet on himself, right? Went to a school, he bet on himself, he worked hard, he got to be the starter on a Division I football team, and now is in a position to make something better, right? That's what you want if you are a chemist. That is what you want if you play saxophone in college, if you are a budding musical artist. All these things is fine, right? And so just because college football or college basketball is attached to that doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing. But I will say this. I also really like the fact that he kind of has a chip on his shoulder, right? Like, third string, let me see. You're just going to put me in the back over here and make me hold the clipboard. Watch this. That's kind of what Duke needs, right? We need some of these guys that are, have chips on the shoulder. Manny Diaz is a coach who coaches like that. He wants players who play like that. And I think this is interesting, Jason. This is the second year in a row. I mentioned on the last show when Malik Murphy declared for the portal, this is the second time that we are going after the number one quarterback in the portal in the second year in a row that we got him. And I think that's an interesting thing that, as you mentioned, it seemed like the writing was on the wall for Malik Murphy. We've heard kind of the rumors about what led to him leaving, and it seems like it wasn't necessarily him saying, thanks for everything, Duke, but I'm going to get mine. It was kind of a situation where they wanted a better, I think you talked about this, a better scheme quarterback. And so it was kind of like
a guy who could run. They wanted a guy who could run a little bit. Yeah.
Well, here's a funny thing, right? Like, it's not even a guy who could run because, Mensah, as I mentioned on the last show, he runs a little bit, but he hasn't run like, a Grayson Loftus or Daniel Jones or whoever we've had over the last 20 years. That's just kind of Manny Diaz's style. But again, this was something where Mensah declared for the portal on Tuesday morning. He was at Duke on Tuesday afternoon. He was sitting in the crazies on Tuesday night. He was at Blue Devil on Wednesday morning. This was happening, ladies and gentlemen. So I think it's great that they identified who they want and they went out and got him. And I think, kind of lumped into this, Jason, with the portal and everything, is Grayson Loftus entered the portal once this happened. Right. And again, you don't really blame the kid, right? If I got recruited over 2 years in a row, I'd probably consider transferring too. But again, that leaves Henry Beelan the fourth as the starter against Ole Miss in the Gator Bowl. He is sticking around. All signs point that he's using this opportunity to show that, hey, just like Mensah did, okay, you recruited another quarterback. Great. Bring on the competition. And you got to love that, right? And you understand the Grayson Loftus perspective of, hey, I want to try and, I see that there's no opportunity for me. I need to find a place where I can get an opportunity to play. And I love the Henry Beeline part where he goes, okay, you recruited somebody else. That's great. Welcome to the team. Let's get this show on the road. And it starts with a bowl game, and I'm going to show you what I can do and why I can be a part of this team and a part of this offense. So it's going to be great to see those two, the quarterback competition from them in the spring. And again, they both have qualities that make it more of a similar, right? If Henry Beelin's in the game versus a Darien Mensah, there's less of a change in scheme. There's less of a change
Right,
in the
right.
playbook. And so we kind of have two quarterbacks that are very similar, and it's about who wins out that starting competition. And then, as we saw this year, maybe we have some more packages next year where the other is bringing in for specific situations. In this case, for Henry Beelan, when he came in, he was getting the ball and he was going to run. It was going to be a triple option or read option type of offense. So I'm feeling what the coaching staff is doing. They want to hone in the playbook and make it where it's similar for everybody. And because of that, we're in the situation where we have Darien Mensah again, the number one portal transfer, according to ESPN, for the second year in a row, is coming to Duke. That speaks volumes about what Manny Diaz and the coaching staff is telling these players and selling them on the vision of what we can achieve here in Durham.
Yeah, and let's get a little bit more to Darien Mensah. Despite what you were just saying, and despite the fact that I'm sure that there will be a legitimate competition, Darien Mensah is going to be the starter at Duke next year.
Mm-hmm. And bring that on,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah.
he's, as you mentioned on the last show, he is no slouch of a quarterback. He had a great season last year, despite the fact that, again, entering the summer, he was not expected to play at all.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that season. He threw for 2,700 yards, 22 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions. As we've mentioned, he's not going to run a ton, but he's a very good athlete, very good on his feet, and probably 4, 5, 6 times a game, maybe you're going to see him pull it down and run with the ball, and he can be very effective in that way. The thing that people are going to love about him is he had a 66% completion rate. Really, really good touch in the short to medium range game. He does not have the arm strength. He does not have like the 40+ yard bomb kind of strength that we had from Malik Murphy this past season. But he's going to be just way more effective on every down, as opposed to Malik Murphy being sort of a hit and miss kind of guy. As a result of that strong completion rate and guys running with the ball after they catch it, Darien Mensah had an outrageous, ridiculous 9.5 yards per attempt rate, which was the 6th best in all of college football. Every time he dropped back to pass, every time he slung that ball, on average, they got 9.5 yards out of it. That's a really, really big number.
Well, Jason, that number is important, remember, because when we played SMU, the one thing we talked about was Kevin Jennings, who at that point was, arguably the best player in the country, at least playing wise.
Yeah.
We're like, he averages a first down every time he snaps the ball, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you want an offense where we've talked about one of our Achilles heels this year was third down to conversions. You don't have to worry about that if you're averaging 10 yards a play, right? So it sounds like a good deal to me.
Yeah, actually, I got the numbers backwards. So his 9.5 yards per attempt was the 3rd highest in college basketball. His overall QB efficiency was the 6th. College football.
College football,
right? Yeah. His overall QB efficiency was the 6th best. But I mean, these are outrageous numbers from a guy who is a redshirt freshman. And Tulane, by the way, even though they are not a power conference team, the AAC is a very, very strong conference. They're playing legit, big time programs all the time. Tulane is a club that, is quite often ranked in the top 25, goes to significant bowl games. And for Darien Mensah to do what he did last year is very impressive. And you've got to hope and expect that maybe, if he does the same thing for Duke next year, then you would again like Duke to be a team to, challenge for double-digit wins in the season, which would just be huge. Last thing I have on him, Donald, did you know he's got a twin sister?
I did. Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Yeah. And she is also a college athlete. She plays soccer for Oregon. So this is a athletic family coming, at least half of them coming to Duke.
In addition to the stats and trivia you just mentioned, Jason, one thing that Duke fans need to understand: September 13th, 2025, Duke at Tulane. This is going to be very interesting. We will very quickly. Mensah will get to return home to New Orleans to see or to play against his former team. I know that both teams. I know Mensah will have that date circled. I know Tulane will have that date circled for various reasons. But also, Jason, I wonder again. He came to campus on Tuesday and was visiting Duke. As we mentioned, he went to Tulane. Guess who also went to Tulane? Sion James, and there was a little bit of an overlap there.
Yeah.
So I know that those two guys know each other, and hopefully, Sion, who Jason, as you very well know, is a guy who could read you the phone book and would make you want to call somebody. Sion James probably was instrumental in saying, "Hey, here's how my transition from Tulane to Duke has been on the basketball side, and here's how it could work for you."
Yeah, and I almost hesitate to say this because you don't know how guys' careers will go. We're in an era where everybody moves around all over the place. It is not uncommon for guys to play 4 different years at 4 different schools. But Darien Mensah, when he committed to Duke, did talk about the value of a Duke education. Tulane is also a very, very strong academic school, and it's clear that he cares about the quality of his education, and maybe that's something that helps him stick around for a little bit. I mean, one of the craziness about the portal, like I say, is that you don't know who you're going to have from year to year. Donald, I just really quickly wanted to touch on this. The first 3 days, the portal was open. Arkansas had 25 guys going to the portal. Purdue had 22, 7 of whom were 7 Purdue starters who could come back. Said, nah, I'm going to go see what the world is like someplace else. Texas A&M, Mike Elko's school, had 18 guys into the portal. Virginia Tech had 17. That's just in the first 3 days. I haven't checked the latest numbers. I'm sure the latest numbers are way, way beyond that. And this portal chaos at this time of year has led to one team pulling out of their bowl game. Marshall.
Yeah.
The Thundering Herd was supposed to play Army in the Independence Bowl, but their coach took a new job, went to Southern Miss, and 20 players jumped into the portal. And Marshall said, we don't have the guys to field a team. We can't be competitive in a bowl game. And they pulled out of the bowl game. Louisiana Tech, who is a team who is 5-7, is going to replace them. The Louisiana Tech players had all gone home for the holidays. Like, they were done.
But it's the Independence Bowl in Shreveport at their stadium. So easy for them to come back.
Yeah, exactly. But they've literally been called back from their Christmas break to resume practice again, to start, to play in this bowl game. Donald, here's my thing about all this. Why are we still doing bowl games?
I have a different question. Why is the portal date during the season? Because that's really where we're at right now. Is some of these bowls we talk about the guys opting out of bowls and stuff to go to the draft, but really we're seeing again 1,000 people enter the portal on the first day for football, and the fact that the season is still going on. Remember, like Army and Navy played yesterday in a regular season college football game. We have FCS playoffs going on right now, and the college football playoff and bowl games. I mean, the Celebration Bowl was yesterday. So we're in the middle of the season. I think the real issue is not necessarily the bowls, and I know people have been focusing on the bowls, which are going to talk about. But I think the bigger question is, can't we just move the portal date to a little bit later? And I know it's because of
it's because in theory, guys want to be able to. The football season ends, the regular season ends, and they want to be able to get in the portal, transfer to someplace new, and be involved in spring practice. And I understand that desire. But man, it's just this feels like a degree of chaos that college football just does not need. And I go back to, I don't know why bowls still exist. Let's just take the playoff to, I don't know, 16, 24, maybe 28 teams, something like that. Take after the conference championships, take like a week-long break and then get into the games, start them, especially if the conference champions get a bye. Like if you go to let's say you go to 28 teams, which may seem like a lot, but bear with me for a moment. Let's say you go to 28 teams, you still give a bye to the conference champions, which means that they are getting a little extra time off after playing in the conference championship game. Now, it means that the teams that lose the conference championship game don't get as much time off, but there's the break. You still take a 1 week break and then start up, play a couple games, get down to 8 or so, take another week break, and then finish it all off with your final few games. I know it's a long playoff, but having bowl games doesn't make any sense anymore, in my opinion. Teams just aren't Duke's gonna be playing. I love Henry Beeline, but he's functionally Duke's third string quarterback. Grayson Loftus, redshirted this year, but had Duke really needed him, had Malik Murphy got injured, Grayson Loftus would have dropped that red shirt and would have been the starter for Duke's functionally playing their third string quarterback. There are tons of schools out there that are going to be playing a bowl game without multiple starters, 5, 6, 7 plus starters who are, guys who are working on the NFL or working on, going someplace else in the portal or have already gone someplace else in the portal. I just don't think it makes sense anymore. There was a time for bowls. I think that time has passed. And especially the portal has made it obvious that players and coaches, if you ask Manny Diaz right now, which is more important to him, winning the bowl game or succeeding in the portal, keeping the guys he wants to keep, getting the guys he wants to get, Manny Diaz's answer is going to be the portal. What are we doing with this bowl stuff?
I am a traditionalist. I grew up on bowls, and I get it, right? The seasons have changed somewhat to make it where bowls feel more irrelevant. But I will say that talking to players, former players, I promise you, the guys who play in these bowl games care. They give a damn about playing one more game with their players. We talked about last year about all the guys that entered the transfer portal from Duke after Mike Elko left. Guess where all of them were? They were at the bowl game. The guys who were able to play ended up playing. They made that decision. Riley Leonard, I think Riley Leonard, Jordan Waters were the only two who were unable to play due to injury, but they were still at the game, supporting their players, supporting their teammates for one last ride. And I get now with the NIL, that is where it's probably going to change because teams are going to demand that you come in early and get it started. Which look, ain't nobody working over Christmas, right? So except for these college athletes that are in bowl games, and I wonder if that sort of thing changes. But again, it's all dependent on the school. We weren't hit as hard by the transfer portal bug last year than some other schools. And this year so far, you mentioned some of the schools who've lost 20, 25 players. That isn't us, right? We've only had 3 players enter the portal, which is, again, a tremendous job by the staff because that is part of the deal now is to retain the people, as you said, retain the people you want. I think there's a place for the bowl games. I think there's a place for these extra games for some of these teams to, again, end the season on a high note, get a nice little vacation, one last ride. But it all depends on the philosophy of the school. There are some schools, as you know, who are going to be like, this doesn't matter to us anymore. Oh, if we're not in the playoff, we don't care, right? Like, maybe Ole Miss is one of those teams, right? Oh, we're in the Gator Bowl. We should be in the playoff. We don't care about this game. But Duke absolutely cares because instead of us being in the Fenway Bowl, we are now in the Gator Bowl. So now's the prime opportunity for us to showcase our program. And again, that's going to change from year to year. I hope. I said this when we started going to bowl games under Cutcliffe. I hope we never get tired of going to a bowl game. But there may be that day where we're so good that we're like, we missed the playoff. We'll do that. We see it in basketball, right? UNC did make the tournament and they opted out of the NIT. We've seen that because they just don't care. I hope that we never have that mentality as a school. But I understand the sentiment that the bowl system needs to change, especially with NIL and the transfer portal. I think after this season, the NCAA needs to, meet. That would help meet and kind of figure this thing out so that it doesn't hurt the teams and penalize teams for having a good year.
Let's move to another football topic very quickly. This has been a huge, huge part of the sports media landscape for the past several days, and that is that Bill Belichick, the former head coach of the New England Patriots, won, is it 6 Super Bowl? I forget. 6 Super Bowls? Yeah. A pretty impressive NFL resume, has decided to take his coaching acumen to Chapel Hill to coach the Tar Heels. He's bringing his son along, his son who was, I want to say, defensive coordinator at Washington last year. And he's brought a 400-page manifesto with him that UNC needs to abide by. Donald, I'll let you go first on this. What is your thought on Bill Belichick arriving at UNC? Can he revive the sleeping giant that has been sleeping for a long, long time now in Chapel Hill?
So first off, you mentioned the 400-page manifesto. Let's talk about some of the things that are in there. Okay. First of all, he gets a 5-year contract, $50 million. Only 3 years and $30 million are guaranteed. After that, Stephen Belichick, you mentioned his son is coming with him. He is the head coach in waiting. This was part of the deal. is that whenever Belichick leaves, his son takes over. So, and then I think his son gets a 3-year deal, depending on when Belichick decides to hang it up. He also has increased NIL money. It goes from 4 million a year to 20 million a year. He gets 10 million a
That's
year.
a big deal. That's a big deal. Yeah.
That's the big deal. He gets 10 million a year for assistants because he wants to bring in a few of his guys, and they're on, these are guys who are used to NFL salaries, so he's trying to give them as close to that as possible. Also, Jason, he has a $10 million buyout that drops to $1 million on August 1st next year. Why? Because they still think that in the offseason he's going to try and get an NFL job. He even tried to get the Jets job before he accepted the UNC job. He called them up and said, y'all want to take a look at me? And they said, no, thanks. And he said, okay, cool. I'll take the UNC job. So what are they doing here? Right? Like it feels like a situation where they really want to be relevant so bad that they will take any deal that any coach that is of any stature will give them. And when Belichick comes in and has all these lists of demands, UNC says, okay, sounds great to us. I don't know that this is going to help the UNC program in the long term. I know the people inside Carolina who, first of all, inside Carolina being a source that was being referenced nationwide about this news. I'm not ever going to get used to that. But I also, over there, they were talking about how this manifesto could hurt their football or their basketball program because of all the money that now has to shift to football.
Oh, I was going to ask that question.
Yeah, the NIL money is going to be it's got to come from somewhere, and guess who's going to probably take the brunt of that? It's probably the basketball team, especially when they're offering people $2 million in the offseason and people are saying no. So, okay, let's just shift that to football and make sure that we have to, because it's a have to, right? We could spend $10 million in basketball. We have to spend $20 million on football because that's the deal. And so I don't understand what they're doing over here. I don't think that this is going to be something that brings UNC football to relevance. Like College Game Day is not going there. They're not playing anybody that's going to give you, oh my God, UNC is playing this big time game, unless they start playing well, right? They have to earn that right. But for me, I just hope we dust them by 30 every year. I hope the Blue Devil gets to bring the Trident to Chapel Hill next year for the first time in like 60 years, because I know they outlawed it. I hope he gets to plant it at midfield after game. That's how relevant I want Bill Belichick and UNC to be. And I also just think he's part of this manifesto is he said he's not going to do these recruiting trips. So at the end of the day, he's just kind of a CEO of a business, and he's just going to let everybody else do the work. Does that fly with players? And I know we talk about NIL being a big deal, and some coaches or some players are going to say, I get to work or be coached by Bill Belichick. They may not turn down that thing. But there's some guys who are going to be like, yo, the last time this guy won anything, I was 8 years old. Yeah, he's won 6, but it hasn't been. It wasn't last year, and it wasn't the year before that. It wasn't pre or post COVID that he's won anything. And in fact, most of these kids that are coming to college now view the Patriots as a terrible football team led by this guy. So again, there's a lot of questions that UNC has to answer, and none of those answers were bring in Bill Belichick.
I know that there are a lot of people in Duke fandom and other schools that aren't UNC fans who are like, this is going to be a walking disaster. And people just assume that this won't go well. And I can see a lot of reasons why it won't go well. I don't think Bill Belichick's style is necessarily going to work very well at the college level in terms of connecting with the players, in terms of getting the most out of them and that kind of stuff. I'm also not convinced that he's ready to put in the kind of work. I mean, he's in his early 70s. He's at retirement age. I wonder how much of this is, I'm letting my son here. I'm helping my son get a good gig versus I'm really still passionate about this and want to put in the 14, 16 hour days that it takes to be a really, really successful coach at this level. I just don't know that that's there for UNC. But the fact that he got all these commitments for more money for NIL, more money for assistants, is a big deal. That kind of stuff matters. I know he's not going to be out on the recruiting trail, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. His assistant coaches who are going to be good recruiters, that's who he's going to hire. They're going to bring kids into Chapel Hill when it's time to sign that kid on the dotted line. They're going to walk that kid into this special, fabulous office where Bill Belichick's going to be sitting behind the desk wearing 6 Super Bowl rings on his fingers. And he's going to say, you want to know how to get to the next level? You want to become an NFL star someday? I'm the best there ever was at developing talent in the NFL. Tom Brady was a 6th round draft pick until I got a hold of him. The Pats were known league-wide for taking nobodies and turning them into stars. Julian Edelman was a 7th rounder. Wes Welker, undrafted, barely played at San Diego and Miami. Came to New England, these guys became stars. This is what I do. Sign here, I'll do the same thing for you. That's going to be a pretty effective recruiting pitch.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's going to be very effective. And I'm just not, again, I've seen so many people out there saying disaster, train wreck, dumpster fire. This is going to be, an absolute nightmare in Chapel Hill. I see the possibility there, but I think there's also a pretty decent possibility that Bill Belichick does a nice job. Now, am I talking winning 10, 11 games at Carolina? I don't know about that. But 8 or 9? Are you going to bet against Bill Belichick going 8-4 at UNC next year? I don't know that I'm ready to bet against that.
Well, the answer to that is, do you have to? Because that's what Mac Brown was doing for the most part until this past year, right? He was doing 8, even this year, right? He was, there was 7-6 or 6-6, but like that was the worst year that he had there in his 2 stints. And so again, I think they only have one 10-win season in the last like 25 years or something like that. And so, they've got some 9-3s or they start relevant and then they disappear. And the one thing is,
well, yeah, when we played them this year, weren't we both 5-1 or something like that?
We were both undefeated.
Okay.
Because we were both 4-0 entering that game.
That's right.
And then they ended up 6-6, right? We took their soul and just spiraled them into a hell of a season. But again, they wanted to get UNC said they wanted to get younger. They went from a 74-year-old Mac Brown to a 73-year-old Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, you know what he's not known for? Interviews, talking to people, giving you information. Guess what's going to be a big deal with these NIL things when they're trying to sell him on the future of the program and what he needs to do? He needs to be a seller. He needs to be a motivator. He needs to motivate big wigs in that Ramses club to give millions of dollars. And that means he's going to have to put on a suit and tie. And he's going to have to act swanky, and he's going to have to be outgoing and extroverted, if only for an evening. That is where people are saying, again, we have 40 years of evidence that he can't do that. That even when he's mandated by the NFL to do interviews, he wouldn't do them. Right? He would just say, just find me. I don't care. Because he was so in his world about making sure that he just, took care of the business of football. And that part, I think some players are going to sign on to. I don't necessarily know that this is going to be a walking disaster. Right now, I hope it will be. I hope that this sets UNC back so hard in football that it trickles down to other sports because they spend so much money gambling on this. And the problem is, as you mentioned, is if it does work out, then damn it, like we got to hear about this for the next 20 years about how this gamble paid off. So I'm with you. I think there's a lot of people who assume this is going to happen. Count me as not someone who does not assume this will happen, but merely hopes. But again, the evidence points to this is going to go one of 3 ways: good, bad, or worse.
Okay. With that, we will take a quick break. On the other side, is Duke a good 3-point shooting team? Is this Duke team a good team that shoots from the outside? We'll answer that question when we come back.
This episode is brought to you by Disney Plus. Game on, because ESPN Plus content is available on Disney Plus. You can watch your favorites from Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus together like never before. With ESPN Plus, unwrap a full day of NBA action on Christmas Day. Tip off the festivities with the Spurs and Knicks, followed by the Mavs and Timberwolves. Then a clash between the Lakers and Warriors, followed by the 76ers and Celtics. And finally, the Nuggets face off against the Suns, all streaming December 25th. Then with Hulu, watch the terrifying sci-fi thriller Alien Romulus, where a group of young space colonizers come face to face with the ultimate horror. And on Disney Plus, follow the adventures of 4 kids across the galaxy as they meet unlikely allies and enemies in Star Wars Skeleton Crew, starring Jude Law. All of these and more now streaming and available with a bundle subscription. Visit DisneyPlus.com for details. Terms apply.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Donald, we're back from the break, and Lee Maxson, who is one of the better emailers that we have on this podcast, sends us headlines all the time. Lee sent us a question this time. I will go ahead and read the question in its full, and then I'll let you take the first stab at answering it, and then I'll take a stab at answering it. The question is this. Lee said, guys, now that it's no longer a small sample size for Duke, are we worried that this is a poor shooting team? Sure, they'll have a game here or there that a bunch of guys get hot. But personally, I'm concerned that the relatively consistent poor shooting will cost us in important big games when it matters most. What do you think? So, Donald, is this Duke team a poor shooting team?
So I answer that question, and thank you, Lee, for the question. It's, again, as you mentioned, a very simple question that we're probably going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes discussing.
Exactly.
But I think for people who are asking if this is a poor shooting team, I think they need to understand, and I'm sure they do, that there's a difference between being a poor shooting team and a team that's shooting poorly. In my opinion, this is a good shooting team that is shooting poorly right now. The reason why I say that is because we have so many of these guys who have their averages down from last year, whether it's in high school or the pros or in college. Like, Caleb Foster, for example, shooting 31% from 3 this year. He was one of our leaders on the team last year. He was shooting over 40%, almost 41%. Sion James is about even, but he's still slightly down from last year. Mason Gillis is way down. We've talked about his three-point shooting and how it's way down from last year. The only guy really that is a returning college player that's gone up is Tyrese Proctor, who's up to almost 42% shooting from 3, whereas his career average is around 35%. Of course, we love that. We've seen that you're going to win that stat category with the number of threes that he's hit so far this season. But even if you look at the freshman, right? Cooper Flagg, his last 2 years in high school, he shot exactly 37.5% in both years from 3. He's shooting 22% from 3 this year.
Yeah.
Con Knipple, we talked about how he emerged because of the fact that he could shoot so well. He shot 40% his senior year from 3. He's shooting 34.5% from 3 this year. So this season. So again, maybe that's the translation to college. Maybe that after those first 2 games where he was on fire, everyone said, okay, let's key in on the guy who could shoot nothing but threes, and he's had to adapt his game a little bit. Even Malik Brown, right? He doesn't shoot a lot of threes. 2 years ago, his freshman year, he shot 0 threes. Last year, he was 38.9% from 3. This year, he's 20% from 3. And again, his is a small sample size because he's not taking as many shots as some of the others. But on the whole, everybody's perceived 3-point rate is down slightly or even greater than they were last year or throughout their career. So I think this is just a team that right now is shooting poorly because we have seen that some of these guys have the tendency to shoot well consistently over a season, or at least shoot better than they're doing right now.
All right, so let me start by addressing what you were just talking about there, which is that I agree with you. Con, Coop, Caleb, and Mason are all shooting worse than we would expect based on their career statistics. That said, it's worth noting, I think Tyrese Proctor was up at 50% for a while. He's now down, like you said, 41.5%. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he's going to end the year above 40%. If you look at his career, he had 32 and 35% his first 2 seasons. But he's probably, he's shooting better, I think, because he's now on the wing as opposed to playing point guard. It's sort of a different kind of shot that he's taking. He doesn't have the ball in his hands quite as much. And that may be helping his shooting percentage a little bit. But I don't know that that Tyrese is going to, he's probably pretty close to where he's going to end up. Isaiah Evans, it should be noted, is hitting 50% on his threes. And he's taking 4.8 3-pointers per game. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think Isaiah is going to, we've seen he is a high volume shooter. And, he's had a couple big halves, really. I don't think that's sustainable over the course of the entire season. So I think he may come down a little bit. And then the other guy, you mentioned Sion, is at 33%. He's a career 34%. He is what he is. But if you get Caleb up a little bit, Coop and Mason feel like they could be up a lot. Khan feels like he could be up a little bit. That does make a big difference. But I want to go back to the original question, which is this a poor shooting team? Even at the numbers we're at right now, I want to be clear about something. This is not a poor shooting team. The national average on 3-pointers is 33%. And that's the same almost every year. Sometimes it's up, a tick here or there, but 33% is the national average for college basketball. And this Duke team's hitting 35.2%. Now, most years, that's sort of kind of close to the low range for Duke. Most years, Duke's between 35 and 37%. Occasionally we'll get a 38, occasionally we'll get a 33, 34. But we're right in there with what Duke usually is. Now, last year we were at 37.7% because Jared McCain and Jeremy Roach both hit better than 40% from three, and they were our two most frequent 3-point shooters.
And Caleb Foster was over 40.
Right, exactly. Yes. But it's just not that common for Duke to hit more than about 37, 38%. And again, we're at 35+% this year. Dom, do you know the best 3-point shooting year of any Duke team?
Was it 2000 and was it 2004?
No, it was 2013.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We hit 39.9%. Seth Curry, Quinn Cook, Ryan Kelly each took a lot of threes. All three of those guys were above 40%. So that season was basically Duke's best 3-point shooting season from a percentage standpoint, and we were below 40%. So, again, I think fans looking at this team and going, "Oh, they should be way higher." Let's be realistic. It doesn't get for Duke team. It doesn't get a lot higher. But the other thing I want to mention that I think is a very big deal is that Duke is taking a ton more threes than they usually do.
Uh-huh.
This year's Duke team, 48% of our shots are coming from 3-point range. That's outrageous. I looked at Duke history. Donald, there is only one season in Duke history where more than 40% of our shots came from 3-point range. That was 2001, the national championship team. 41% of their shots came from long range.
And we had some shooters then too, right? Shane,
Jay Will,
Duhan, they all could shoot.
Yeah, exactly. That team was loaded. It was basically 4 shooters, and even Nate James surrounding Carlos Boozer. Yeah, that team could fire from the perimeter. 41% of their shots came from 3-point range. This year's Duke team, 48. I mean, like a whole order of magnitude, 20% higher for this Duke team. This Duke team is taking a ton of 3-point shots. So the fact that we're at 35%, just a couple ticks, maybe lower than what typically you see from Duke, it's not that bad because we're taking so many more shots. And again, 3 worth more than 2. If you tell me, shave a point or 2 off your percentage, but take 20% more 3-pointers, I'm doing it every day of the week. That is a formula for success in college basketball. The fact that this Duke team is able to get off 48%, almost 50% of their shots, good shots from 3-point range, that is a really good thing in college basketball.
And like I said, a lot of these guys aren't poor shooters. They're not shooting well. And I think where this question comes from is the frustrating part of this, right? The frustrating part is all the open threes that we're missing, right? And just think of how many of those changed the outcome of the games that we lost, made other games easier victories. That's where some of this frustration is coming from of whether we're a poor shooting team because we're missing open shots. And that's going to be happening. But as you mentioned, Jason, you mentioned 2001, was the only other year that we shot above 40% of our shots from 3. The analytics have changed on how college basketball and basketball in itself is played since then, right? More threes or shots at the rim. We talk about that. The mid-range game has basically dissipated to 0. or to essential 0. And despite all that, right, we're still the 11th most efficient offense in the country.
Yeah.
So the numbers are showing that, yes, we may be taking more threes, we may be hitting fewer of them, but that is what leads to efficiency because we're, again, our effective field goal percentage is a little bit higher than most years because we're hitting a few more threes, right? And I think where also the frustration lies is in some of the raw numbers, where if I'm taking 30 shots from 3, you're not going to, like, how many teams hit 15 threes? Very few. But that would be 50%. 40% would be, 12? How many people hit 12 threes in a game? Not many. So when someone says, "Oh, I see we hit 8 threes, but we took 30," that's a terrible percentage. And you go, it feels like that. But the way like all the offensive rebounds that led to extra points, all the, some that where we might be fouled, where we get free throws. Those are things that the numbers kind of skew because the raw numbers from a game, the live stats where you see that we took 30 threes and we hit only 8 of them. I go 8 threes in a game is more than most teams hit in the game. I mean, if you think about last year, how good we shot last year, how many games we only have 1 or 2 threes that we hit? And then there were some where we hit 15 for 20, and you're like, oh, well, that's what we should do in every game. That's just not how this is not how 3-point shots work. If it was that easy, everyone would take 90% threes and just hit 90% threes, and we'd have games in the 200s. So I caution people to look at some of these numbers and kind of go, hey, just like we say on turnovers, the number is 12. If we're above 12, it's very difficult to win the game. If we're under 12, it makes it much easier to win a game.
Yeah.
10 is the number. If we're hitting 10 threes, we're probably winning most of those ball games because nobody's hitting 10 threes to match that. If we're hitting 5 threes, okay, it's a little bit more difficult to win a basketball game, especially if you're taking so many. So I think these numbers kind of show that this team, again, like even Lee said, there's going to be games where we're going to be hot. We're going to shoot 80% from 3. Seems like everybody else is doing it against us in first halves. Maybe that'll help factor in for us one game. But I think this team is on a roll. And for some of these guys, it's just going to be one game, 1 or 2 threes here and there that are going to vault them back into a percentage that is closer to what they're normally shooting. Mason Gillis, if he hits like 5 more threes, he's going to be back up above 30%. And he's going to be closer to what he normally shoots. Again, Sion James, he hits 1 more 3. He's above his average. Some of these guys just need a couple more threes to get close to where they're normally shooting. And if they're getting close to what they're normally shooting, this is a good shooting team. And we're not having this conversation.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. And I think it's going to get a little bit better, not dramatically better. I don't think this team's going to hit 40% of their threes on the season. That's a big number. And history tells me that Duke just doesn't do that. But yeah, I agree with you. If we can get to the point, where we're hitting 10 threes, that's a big number. That'll win you a lot of games, as you pointed out. All right, with that, we're going to do it on the latest episode of the DBR podcast. Check your feed, folks. We're coming at you again in just a matter of hours. We'll have the preview of Duke's game against George Mason coming up. Until then, he's Donald. I'm Jason. Here's the Duke band. They're playing us out, and they're taking us home. I don't know why my good microphone doesn't work on this computer. It's just bizarre to me.
Yeah, I mean, I have this. Thankfully, it adapts to whatever computer I'm on. But
Yeah.
as you know, it obviously sounds like I'm on the road because it's not the good one. And I also, this one's on its last leg, so I need to invest in another travel mic.
Yeah, travel mic less expensive than investing in a new damn computer. I think I need to go to a place and just like have them clean off all the crap that's on this older computer. Because the problem is my work computer, the one I'm using right now, I can't install my editing
Outside stuff,
software.
right.
Yeah, I can't put that on it. So I have this old computer where I have all my editing software. Like if I didn't need the editing, I'd be fine. But I've got to edit on that computer, and it's such a nightmare.